I'll come straight to the point. This is, don't get overwhelmed by a subject like Indian civilization and all that. It's all a fancy way of putting things. This is something that you see all around you, and today I'll try to help you ask the right questions. Ask questions more and more as we go along. You see, have you ever wondered how we treat India? One Mrs. Venkatraman sitting next to an Ahuja, sitting next to a call, and then you have somebody from Northeast, and none of us feel odd about it. Have you noticed? We don't feel odd about it because there's something unifying among all of us. See the craziness with which we watch matches, wave, shout. There's no feeling of difference, but if you look at it intensely, you'll find the difference between two groups in India is more than that is more than the difference between, let us say, a Scotsman and a Polish. At least a Scotsman and a Polish have something in common, but what would, let us say, somebody who has never traveled beyond Kerala would have common between somebody in Arunachal? But that really has not precluded us from becoming one nation. As Mukul read out, the British have always insisted on two things, that India is just a geographical expression. It's never a nation, it never was a nation. There's a quote by Strachey, one of the imperial scholars, who said, there is not and never was an Indian nation. Pronouncement. They cursed us before leaving, and the second thing that they insisted was that we got you guys together. We got you guys together. Had it not been for us, you would have been remaining quarreling ethnicities. Well, they have a pinch of truth, but loads of lies. I'll explain to you as we move along. First of all, we must, once we accept the fact that we are here together and we don't feel odd about it, widely different languages, we have our own systems of reaching our equilibrium. We can talk in a common language and go back and have our food. Talk to our aunts or grandmothers in our language and talk to others in the language they'll understand, and keep switching gears as we talk. And that is. Now, first of all, the first misinformation that we need to dispose of is that this was acquired by conquest. Unities are usually a byproduct of conquest, no doubt about it. But in the case of India, the country as we know, or the country that we knew in 1947, was never, I insist, never held together in its whole, not even during the British period. They had 14 pink provinces, British provinces, and 565 kingdoms. Many of you know of Jodhpur, Jaipur, Bhopal, vagara, vagara. You know all of these. So these were different kingdoms. You needed a passport, you needed a visa, you needed a separate currencies there. They are within what we call the subcontinent of India, but they were technically all separate. They had their own sipahis, they had their own cannons, they had their own everything. So 565 princely states or kingdoms and 14 different provinces was what the British gifted us and said tata goodbye, leaving us at that point. But before that, the first essential lessons we are taught in history is that India has been united by great emperors like Chandragupta Maurya, the Mauryas, the Guptas, the Moguls. These are the three major dynasties. Just to get you off the wrong impression, the Mauryas never ruled more than 2/3 of India. And it's a very loose form of rule. At the highest also, Karnataka, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, it's all outside their land. But they went all the way up to Afghanistan and beyond. That's a different issue. Move on, a few hundred years later, the Guptas, the imperial Guptas. The imperial Guptas never even crossed the Narmada. When they talk of the art of imperial Guptas, look at the art of Ajanta. Ajanta was outside the realm. It's like us claiming Bangladesh is ours. I mean, it's sort of, you're not there in the border. But they had a profound influence. I'm not demeaning them. I'm just telling you that territorially they were not in command of even more than 55% of India. That's all. They had a glorious period, 55% is all they controlled. Move on to the Moguls. Forget the first two. Come to number 3, 4, and 5, and 6. 6 is a bit of a problem, but at 6 was the highest, and that was around 75% of troubled India. Theoretically, they held India together. Aurangzeb held India, theoretically about 75%. The point is, it was never, 100% of it was never got together, so the Nayars and the Pillays were always out. But they are very much a part of one integral civilization. So was there another level beyond conquest that got us together? Obviously, the answer lies that it was not in conquest. There was various aggregators playing along. It's time we recognized Indian history for its real worth, not for what the textbooks tell us. What were these aggregators? I would personally give credit to two groups. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not referring to castes. I'm referring to socio-economic groups. One group was what I would call the bearers of Brahmanical culture, largely Brahmins. Whether we like them or don't dislike them, whether we feel they had imposed wrong systems, is beyond the point. Factually, they were carrying together a particular message, a narrative that ultimately got India together. I'll come to the point, how it all happened. And the second was very interesting. You have a map of India, yeah? This is very interesting. I was wondering what this stick is for. It was placed next to Mukul, and I thought that this was something that the lady study group does on. I wasn't very sure, but anyway. So I didn't know, so it looked very threatening. Now I remember. It's a pointer. Nandita, take note. Now, the second group were traders, entrepreneurs, and that's one role we don't give them their dues. Let me explain how they operated. I'll just give you one or two examples, and you'll see how this group had crisscrossed India, because there were only two groups that crisscrossed India, and everybody else was in their little puddles. They were in their little village, province, kingdom, whatever you had, and most of them had never crossed the boundaries of their village. And yet, they were all subject to a pan-Indian narrative that was brought in, preached, propagated, call it whatever. I'll give you an example how these things, how when bullock carts were the only means of communication, see the enterprise of the Indian trading groups. A ship would come in from, does it work? Would come in from, say, China and come up somewhere in Rupnarayan. Ganga was then silted, so it comes along Rupnarayan. Rupnarayan is, I don't know whether you know, near Haldia. Anyway, it comes along and meets the Bhagirathi, and then it goes up the Bhagirathi to a point. There was no Farakka barrage, so you could sail through, and goes along the Ganga around this way. And finally, the Ganga has three left-hand turns, three major left-hand turns. It takes a third left-hand turn, a river called Chambal Daku, remember? Phulan Devi, that Chambal. And then it turns around from Chambal this way, and it comes along, and then the Chambal becomes unnavigable. So our merchants know exactly what to do. They transfer their goods to a tributary of the Chambal called Shipra, a holy river. Now you'll understand why it's holy. So Shipra, and from Shipra, at the end of Shipra, you get a town called Ujjain. Now, you'll understand how commerce and piety were all mixed up together. Because these were important trading ports, there was chanda given. lots of chanda given, lots of wealth flowing. So Ujjain becomes a very important trading center, come a pilgrimage. And all you did was offload it at Ujjain, and next morning go by bullock carts to reach the Narbada at a point called Mahesh. Mahesh Saris, I think, na? Maheshwar. Maheshwari. So Maheshwar, or Mahesh as it's called, you reach there in exactly 2 days. And once you are Mahesh, you are on Narbada. And on Narbada, you come out into the into the Arabian Sea, and tata goodbye. So you have served. Have I been able to explain one route more or less? So there were hundreds of routes like this, and to explain how these things happen and why I picked on 2 groups, you have to understand that when you think of Chanakya, Chanakya was supposedly born. We haven't figured out, he didn't carry his Aadhaar certificate. Now, we didn't have them at that time. So Chanakya was born somewhere near Kanchipuram, deep down in south, and went up this way, holding on to river valleys one after the other, till he reached Peshawar. From here, this is where he was taught, where he studied, and where he taught students. And from there, he goes down in search of work to Patliputra, Patna. Can you see the crisscrossing of India? Crisscrossing at a time when there were hardly any means of transport. It was that compulsion that got India together. You know Shankaracharya? You know where he was born? So most of you know, but just for the heck of it, I'll explain. He is born here, goes and sets up a mutt here in the Himalayas. The second mutt he sets up at Dwarka. The third mutt he sets up at Jagannath. And the fourth mutt at Rameswaram here. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, the diamond of India being crisscrossed by a diamond-like structure at 4 corners. India was never ruled from the center. That's the essence of Indian wisdom. Never. One nutcase tried it. His name was Muhammad bin Tughlaq, saying, I got to rule from the center. Phew, would not like to think much about it. Now, these are the same places that the British chose in all their advanced wisdom for 4 capitals also. Calcutta, Bombay, Delhi, and Madras. There's no connection between the two, but that's how you operate. Okay, so move on. These 2 classes that I mentioned were the trading groups and this thing. They have actually contributed a lot to getting India together. They were what I call the aggregators. The ruling groups were, of course, there, the Kshatriyas, the Rajputs, whatever you call them, but they were highly localized. It's only after the trains came in that they sort of got crisscrossed each other and got intermarried within different places. Now, to understand this story of India, we must understand space or geography, and we must understand time. To space, the spatial part is, as I said, the holy rivers. First of all major rivers are converted into holy. And they are holy because, don't mess around with it, because they are our national highways. They were the national highways. So every river, Nashik, what the hell has Nashik to do? It's not in the Ganga. Hang on. Nashik is very close to the Arabian Sea, near Bharuch. You could bring things to Nashik in 1 day from the Arabian Sea. And Nashik is on a river which connects to Bhima. Okay? Bhima is a tributary of Godavari. And Godavari means you can come out here. This is Nashik. There's a river going. This is the Godavari. And you come out here to Machilipatnam. So everything, once you start looking at it, everything has got something to do with some source of economic wealth. And this economic transfers of power, transfers of goods and services actually got my country together. And the philosophy that held it together, I'm not coming into the good part or the bad part of it, that we'll discuss some other day. This is what I'm saying is just a saransh, just the little bit, the what actually happened. So, first of all, you have the rivers all being taken into account, and lest you forget, every prayer begins with Ganga, Saraswati, Yamuna, Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Sindhu, Kaveri, Krishna, isn't it? So this is to get the idea clear to everyone in every place. Somebody who's not seen any of these rivers, somebody in Tripura, who's not seen any of the rivers, knows these rivers by heart from day one. So that's the operational style of how you take it. Similar mountains. I get amazed at a time when people walk by foot. How on earth did you discover Kailash? And Kailash is not only a source of beauty and inspiration, it's a place from where you get three important rivers coming out. The three important rivers, I thought somebody was raising slogans. Now, band karo. So, Kailash is a place from where you get three important rivers coming out, the Indus, the Ganga system, and the Brahmaputra systems. So this extent of geography comes from people who are adventurous and enterprising. So you have all the mountains, the Vindhyas, as sacred. So we have declared all the highways to be sacred. You have declared all the impediments to be sacred. All the mountains and barriers to be sacred. And as you move along, the most enterprising, most interesting way of getting all of India together were the two epics. I'm not getting into the details of the epics, good, bad, whether somebody was born here or somebody was not. That's not my business. That's for others, genealogists, to find out, people. What I am interested is the mechanism in which it operated. Both the epics had two convenient periods when you are off the map, no more GPS functioning. Okay? 14 years Vanvas, and 13 years Vanvas, and 1 year of Agyatvas. 14 mil gaya. For 14 years, the protagonists of both the epics, protagonist groups, were moving around all sorts of places with all sorts of names, and every part of India claimed that I am Chitrakoot, I am Manipur. There are 1,719 claimants for Manipur. So you understand, by spreading the names and spreading the identities and then claiming the names and claiming the identities. You've all gone on visits. How many times have we been shown which cave Hanuman was born in? Huh? Wherever you go, they say, Sita Maiya stayed here. The idea is not whether she was on a twin sharing basis or whatever. The idea was to identify the main character of an epic, a holy person, a holy character, with a place, and then bring the place from the outlier to the center. What a stratagem. So all these places that are mentioned there, I have seen at least 9 places where they say Jatayu fell. Finally asked them at the 7th place, did anyone see him falling? So Jatayu fell here in Andhra Pradesh, Lepakshi and all that, all sorts of places. The idea is not to ridicule. It's very easy to ridicule. The idea is to understand the mechanics of the mind, that you identify so many places. So you move on these places, and then you identify the lots of this process. You get a certain amount of net results of certain points being declared inarguably holy. The 4 Kumbhs, Haridwar, Prayag, Nashik, Ujjain. Have you noticed Ujjain, Nashik? So all of them come into the holy network all of them come into what we call the sacred network, and then you have Rameswaram, Mathura, Vrindavan, and all that. So this acceptance by a guy sitting in, as I said, Tripura, or somebody who stays in Bankura, who's not even seen the Ganga properly, would be identified, and he would feel himself to be a part of this whole narrative. That's all. Now you move on to timing. I said spatial, that's geographical, then you move on to the temporal, timing. Timing is an obsession with Indians. What do we call it? I mean, we're all late. Muhurat, Kal, Shubh Muhurat. It has to be done by 13th, by 7 a.m., 7:10, 7 hours, 10 minutes, otherwise Shubh Kal will go away. So this question of timing and determining the panchang, the calendar, the date, this thing, obsession, was an all-India phenomenon. Even before these guys were called Hindus or Buddhists or whatever, this remained one of the unifiers of India. And the very clever adjustment between the solar and the lunar. See, the lunar is very easy to understand. If you start from today and look at today's moon, we're just 2 days away from Purnima. So we are on the Krishna Paksh now, dawn. So you'll see it's around 90%, 80%, 70%. If you observe the moon for 2 months, you'll get a hang of it, what date it is. You'll get a hang of it. It's so easy because I have seen it. So everything is determined according to the moon. But bechare moon has only 28 days, na? Problem. Sun has 365 days. It's like this marriage reconciliation. Kahin na kahin to, I mean, you can't do away with it also. So you have to have, so you bring in solar year, lunar years, you bring in some festivals are according to Tithi, that is lunar calendar. Some are fixed according to the solar calendar. You manage to blunder along. That's all. This is what holds together. So the first one is on timing. The second one is about timing. I'll say it a little later. This is about timing of festivals and how they come up. But before that, we need to come to the deities, the gods and goddesses. This is a fascinating process. And the fascinating process is, to understand it, so the first is the process that began from roughly the Vedas till roughly the Guptas. That's around a period of almost 2,500 years. This was a period when every deity was accepted. There's no question of rejection. Ye pagan hai, ye heathen hai, ye Videshi hai. Talk Hindustani. Nothing is this thing. If a community, a group, an ethnic group, a tribal group, a community worships X, you accept it. He looks like a bhoot. That's your problem. Whatever. So everything under the sun, with whatever is accepted by any community of consequence, is brought in. Now, you declare it to be Deva Devi, isn't it? Every stone, little so sindoor chada rahi ho, bas. You don't even know what it is. Every stone, every piece of wood, every tree, have you noticed that all the trees come around, they are the center of all temples? From today, you start observing and you'll see all street shrines are around trees, at the foot of trees, at this. So this basic belief in mountains, in rivers, in trees and all that leads to a widespread acceptance of every form of worship. Every form, including the ones who crack skulls or chop heads. Ghastly now, but it happened. But dheere dheere sudhara lo. Dheere dheere sudhara. That is the Indian process. Bring it in slowly. And over a period, all of them were deified. The deification held all the people together. Conflicting groups. Yaar, hamare ye wala kala hai, this one gore. You don't worry about kale, gore and all that. You worship, you keep your things together. First, this process, and then you find the process of the mega deities forming. Who are the mega deities? According to the Vedic period, the mega deities are Indra, Varun, Agni, vagara vagara. Hai na? You know that Rudra, that period. You've heard of it. You've never seen them. You've said. By the 11th century, by the 7th century, this had started changing. And gradually, 7th century is very interesting because it marks the real arrival of the Devi. Now, patriarchal religion always has problem with women. Always has this problem. So you keep them on the sidelines. You say, Devi hai, but you don't care much. So when I say this, I talk of legitimacy. And legitimacy was in the form of 18 Mahapuranas. These 18 Mahapurana, Padma Puran, Skanda Puran, Vayu Puran, Agni Puran, Shiv Puran, you've heard of them. You may not have read them. I don't think anybody takes the trouble. And chalo. So these Purans give you the sacred literature, the normative structure. One after a lady. Mata Puran, ille. No. So the first Puran through which we get the legitimacy of female power is Markandeya Puran. Markandeya Puran has a whole section called Devi Mahatma. The Devi Mahatma brings in, and once this brings in, Ya Devi Sarvabhutish, once she comes in via one, let us say, surrogate method or whatever, indirect method, she's there. And the first impact of it is that immediately the triad of the Vedic period is replaced. The triad of the Vedic period, remember, first was Rudra, he is converted into Shiva. Second was Brahma, Brahma is sent out on pension to Pushkar, on a hill station to Pushkar. That's the only place. Indra is basically given chutti, but we don't have a temple of Indra. But you remember Indra. Hindustan mein kabhi bhulte nahi kisi ko. You remember Indra as the suffix of a name, like Dharmendra, Narendra. I am not political here. So, it's just a suffix of a name. But he's there, he's not there, he's there, he's not there. So we have this way of pensioning off the Vedic gods, and who replaces them? Brahma, I forgot, he's on pension. Vishnu, Shiva, and Devi. The appearance of Vishnu, Shiva, and Devi over a period of 300 years leads to a very fascinating process. It leads to a lot of mergers and acquisitions. There's lots of mergers and acquisitions. So over a period you find the first major merger and acquisition is Vishnu. Once you get Dash Avatar, in one stroke you have got 9 deities into one. The 10th is yet to come. Hai na? So you have 9 of them rolled into one. Then you have different rupas of Shiva. Devi, my God, completely foxed. Kali is Devi, Gauri is also Devi. Never mind the fair and lovely. So we keep it there. We find all the contradictions and everything. Don't take it seriously because we are now studying you're now looking at a subject that's your own. And we are talking within our own. So we get the appearance of the true Indic religion. And what is that? In one phrase, it is a management of contradictions. India's success has always lied not in homogenization or one niti, one this thing, one that. It lies in the management of contradictions. You have all managed contradictions, and more than that, you have managed the world. Because the other half, you inform, all of you inform on a need-to-know basis, है ना? बाकी तो the other half को आप सब कुछ बताते, कभी नहीं. On a need-to-know basis. At least that's what I get the feeling in my house. Yeah, tum to flying visitor ho, you will be told on a need-to-know basis. So on a need-to-know basis is on this basis of what I said, the arrival of 3 mega deities means that all the deities we talked about are now squeezed into them. They are acquired or they are absorbed into them. Example, very good. Look at the Bavan Peeth Sthans of Shakti, scattered all over, isn't it? So wherever there was a prominent sector, wherever there was a prominent place of worship of the Devi, she is brought in as this, as Maheshwari, as this, Shari, as Kankaleshwari, as this, that's it. Wherever the Jyotirlingas, right from north to south, along with the second layer of the Shiva worship. Then you have the 108 plus Vishnu worships. These aggregations take place, and finally I will end up by saying that the real spirit of India lies in its festivals, the management of contradiction that I said. Any one or two examples, like say Navaratri. Navaratri is a very rigorous festival in North India that's centered. Look at what happens in East. Look at what happens in South. In South, they have never even heard of Navaratri being connected to either Ram or Durga. They have their own ways of dealing with Navaratri, but it's Navaratri. Whether you keep a fast or you gorge on meat and fish is your business, but you have to have your own this thing. Navaratri is also connected with fertility. Like in Maharashtra, they have this Ghat Sthapana. In Gujarat, they have Garba. What is Garba? Womb. It symbolizes the pot. It's a fertility festival, first and foremost. And Garba ke saath you have put Dandiya, that's all. So this is how we operate, one against the other. Look at Diwali. And look at Diwali, and you start with 5 of these dates for Diwali. Dhanteras, and you start, of course, Dhanteras is an infection that's spreading all over India now. Everybody wants to buy something on Dhanteras Day. It goes, but that is India. Nothing is stagnant. And then you say that Diwali, it's a festival of lights and Lakshmi. Look at these bongs. They worship darkness and the dark. No, it's not as far as contradiction that you think it is. Because within this, you have this day that we have as Bhut Chaturdashi. Bhut Chaturdashi is there in all of them, more or less. What you call as Choti Diwali. It's how you call it. It's called Narak Chaturdashi, Najar Chaturdashi. It's called by different names. So that's the whole idea. One who celebrated Narak Chaturdashi, and Narak Chaturdashi is incidentally not celebration of Narak. It's a celebration of the victory of a woman called Satyabhama who defeated Narak Asur. Because Krishna got fagged out. That's all. That's the story. So we have all these things coming in between, woven into one. Look at Makarsankaranthi. It's known by 40 different names. Bohagi, Bhilu, Bihu, it's known as Vishu, it's known as by different things. The Gujaratis fly kites. The monks wouldn't dare to fly kites because you thanda lege jabe. So all sorts of things. So we have this thing, middle of January. They have monkey caps and all sorts of things. But then, since good wasn't grown in Bengal, you have Tilen Nadu. You come up with your solutions, the innovativeness you got. But what is the essence of Makarsankaranthi? All women would know, I take 2 moments. All women would know that you can't run a household without 5 things. The 4 essential things are salt, masala, oil, because you don't use animal fat in India, oil, sugar. And the 5th one is a maid if possible. Okay. So these 4 are essential, and in India you had sugar, you had salt was plenty, spices were plenty. Problem is, sugar and oil came through crops. Do you know what is the origin of tela? Tel? It comes from a word called tila, til. And the oleoresin of til is called tailam, tela. So the original purest oil is gingerly oil or til oil. So everything that we call as oil is actually we are referring to til. Now til and sugarcane came up together in the month of November. And that is a reminder in our festival. What do we celebrate Makarsankaranthi with? Gajak, Revdi. What is Gajak, Revdi? Til and Gud. So you have to understand the festivals for their own values. It's easy to laugh away, it's easy to denigrate, it's easy to even give superior values. But the actual thing was these two crops came in, and if you had sugar, a bountiful sugar and a bountiful til crop, you were assured of 2 and 2, 4. You were assured of the sugar supply and you are assured of the oil supply. And the maize supply remains like this always, even from then, from those days. So you had, at every level, you'll find that this sort of a thing is the essence. So even if you look at 3 festivals, I've just named 3, I have lots of them. Navaratri, Diwali, you look at Makarsankaranthi, you'll find the essence of it is management of contradictions and adornment of history. We don't understand why is it that in winter Gajak and Revdi are given. They are celebration. Yeah, now you can get cube sugar in any form anywhere. But they are celebration, the historic celebration, the historic memory of the story of how India got together. So I'll close at this level. I let you think and give me more and more inputs as you go along. If you observe something that I have missed out, please send it to me via whatever route. The story of India is one of complete coordination, amalgamation, and a voluntary union of maddening, impossible ethnic differences. 600 languages. God knows how many ethnic groups, something like 1,400 ethnic groups. They held together by a narrative, by a value system, and by certain enterprising communities that have brought them together through the journey of history in the management of contradictions. Thank you very much.